it's one of the fastest things that will make an agent or an editor perk up. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to talk just a little bit about exposition and some of the things that make great exposition in a story. Now, just for introduction, what is exposition? Exposition is the first starting paragraphs of it can be the entire story, it can be a novel, but it's the thing that situates you in the story. It's introductory, it opens the story up to the reader. It's not dialogue, it's not really the action scenes, it's just introduction work. In film, you often see exposition because the camera will sort of pan from the city down to the street, down to the building, into someone's office. That's kind of exposition. We're laying the groundwork. So what we're going to do today is we'll look at a few examples of this in stories that I think does it really well. And I just want to run by a few things with you that you want to think about for your exposition. Now, there's a lot. I know I say this in so many of my videos, but there is a lot that you could say about what makes good exposition, which we get into much more in the plot framework course. For the sake of this video, I just want us to focus on a few things that you can think about when you're starting your stories as a whole. Now, chapters can have exposition as well, but I want us to just focus on really the start of this story as a whole. So let's dive in. A few things that you really want to think about when you're doing this. You want to get the readers intrigued. So one of the things that you can do is just really write in unique details or aspects of a setting or something like that that are just unusual and intrigue the reader quite a bit. We will see this in sort of opening lines of some of the ones that we're going to look at. I also have a video either coming out soon or is out now about really great opening lines to stories, and that also would be very helpful here. So if you haven't watched that, I will link it below or hopefully somewhere on this video, and you can go watch that one as well. But getting the reader engaged with something that's very unexpected or unusual or strange is a great way to grab their attention, which is very important for you to do, especially in today's very busy world. Another thing that is wonderful for exposition, and this one I think really is important, is to fairly quickly create a question in the reader's mind. You want the reader saying, what does that mean? Who is that? What's going to happen next? The reader needs to get a question very quickly, which means that if you just stand there doing a lot of description for the sake of description, the reader's only question is, what's the point? That is the question you do not want your readers asking. So pretty quickly you want to insert something that will make the reader go, oh, even in your descriptions, you want someone doing that. So keep that in mind, that yes, you're introducing, but you want to get them asking questions very, very quickly. Also, I'm sorry if I'm looking down, I teach from notes. Have a unique authorial voice. This is so key. I know I've said it numerous times, but it's so important because it's one of the fastest things that will make an agent or an editor perk up. It's just honestly rare, I think, to find someone who has truly distinct voice, which is why I spend a lot of time with my students and my clients when I work one-on-one with them, developing that and designing it. I have an entire workshop on developing your authorial voice, which I will link below, that walks you through numerous exercises that build on one another to help you really take the best parts of you and your writing, the things you'd like to be, inspiration from others, and kind of pulls it all together into a voice that you discover that's really yours. So if you haven't taken that, I highly recommend it. Again, I will link it below, but make sure you do have a unique voice and that unique voice comes out immediately. Remember that when you are writing your exposition, you are setting the reader up for what is coming. You are not here to just sort of tell me about your character or tell me about the setting or tell me about the plot situation. That's not what you're doing. Every sentence you write has to have a purpose that is informing the reader of things that matter in that story. And does that mean you can't just describe the hillside? No, there's a way in which that familiarity with the setting can matter, but you really want to be strategic and recognize that this is your opportunity to get the reader really excited about that plot. You have very little time to do it. You need to set them up for what is going to come. A classic example of this is Romeo and Juliet, where right in the start of Romeo and Juliet, I mean, Shakespeare's boom. Here are these two houses. They're divided. They're against each other. He lays it out in about 8 lines. Boom. This is the situation, and that's so important. We need to know that the Capulets and the Montagues don't get along, and that where they are and everything else, so that we can appreciate why Romeo and Juliet's romance is unacceptable. So Shakespeare gets you into conflict right away. It's so good. So these are just a few pieces of advice, but I firmly believe examples are essential. I know writing students like lists, they're like, oh, just give me a list, give me a checklist, tell me a few pieces of advice. If you're not looking at examples in literature, you are missing out, because it gives you so much inspiration, and it really does help bring concepts to life. So I cannot say enough, when I make videos that have examples from literature, don't miss it. Don't leave, because it's so important. Before I dive in, if you're enjoying this video or this channel, would you please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe, because I'd so like for you to be a part of this community. Also, I have a newsletter. If you are interested in my workshops, sometimes I offer free workshops and whatnot, you definitely want to be signed up for the newsletter. So I will link that below. Sign up so that you can keep apprised of all of the new wonderful things that are going on and some learning opportunities for you. Okay, having said that, let's dive in and let's look at a few examples of how stories are opened in literature. And the first one we're going to look at is Emma, Jane Austen's Emma. I think this is such a great story. Austen writes it so well, and this introduction in particular is wonderful because it really sets up for us. The authorial voice, you're going to notice, is extremely distinct. It's very Jane Austen. She sets up for us who Emma is, and we get hints of, there's going to be some conflict here. And then she also sets up the conflict for us. All right, so let's dive in. Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. Okay, we're going to stop right there. We can go on, but let's just take a pause. Already, this is it one sentence or two? Yeah, no, it's one. This is one sentence, and in one sentence, we're basically, you read this and it's like, Emma, everything is going well in her life. She's had no troubles. She's had no problems. She's pretty and she's wealthy and everything is good. Prime setup for something to go wrong, right? We talk about in my courses maximizing the drama. You can't maximize the drama in a character's life much more if it's this perfect for something to go wrong. So we're already introduced to somebody who has had a fairly easy life. The authorial voice really does. Jane Austen inserts herself into the stories through her voice. She has opinions, and so we already see this. So she goes on to talk about how Emma is the youngest of 2 daughters. They're the most indulgent, affectionate father, and then she goes on to basically say that in consequence of her sister's marriage, her sister left, and Emma has been the mistress of the household. It says her mother had died too long ago for her to have more than an indistinct remembrance of her caresses, and her place had been supplied by an excellent woman as governess who had fallen little short of a mother in affection. Now, very important here. So we've already been told Emma is happy, everything's great, everything's wonderful. She had a sister, but her sister married and left, and her mother died so long ago she was too young to remember, and she's had this governess since then who has basically become a surrogate mother. So this is interesting because you could have written a story in which, this poor girl lost her mother and everything's so hard and horrible, and no, everything is just fine. She's had this wonderful governess to take her place. Everything is just fine. So then they go on to talk about Miss Taylor is the governess. So Austen basically talks about Miss Taylor. She says this 16 years ago she was there. She was so close with the sisters. They were all very close. She's just mild in temper. She's a good friend and everything else. So what do we know? We know Emma's happy and rich and wealthy and everything's great. She had a sister, but her sister married and moved away. She's had a governess for 16 years who has basically been a mother and then eventually a friend as Emma gets older. So that's what we know. And then we get this very important sentence, and it is that basically Even before Miss Taylor had ceased to hold the normal office of governess, the mildness of her temper had hardly allowed her to impose any restraint, and the shadow of authority being now long passed away, they had been living together as friend and friend, very mutually attached, and Emma doing just what she liked, highly esteeming Miss Taylor's judgment, but directed chiefly by her own. This sentence is so important because we have been told Emma's great, everything's life is wonderful, sister's gone, had a governess, the governess had a parental role for a while, but then that slipped away, and the governess was not very, do your schoolwork. She's not like that. And so Emma's really been able to have her own way. That's what Austen is saying. Emma's pretty, Emma's rich, and Emma gets her own way. The real evils indeed of Emma's situation were the power of having rather too much of her own way, and a disposition to think a little too well of herself. These were the disadvantages which threatened alloy to her many enjoyments. The danger, however, was at present so unperceived that they did not by any means rank as misfortune with her. So Emma wants her own way, but she doesn't realize that she's a little bit selfish and wants her own way. And then Austen tells us that sorrow came, a gentle sorrow, but not at all in the shape of any disagreeable conscience. Miss Taylor married. So Miss Taylor marries and goes away, and that's where the story opens up. This is a phenomenal exposition. Great authorial voice. Just great introduction of character, especially when combined with the authorial voice of this. But we really get set up. You could have just said Emma was spoiled, Emma was this or not, but the way it's written is just so everything's great, everything's wonderful, everything's fabulous, and even these little dispositions, a gentle, not a hard thing, but a gentle, but we really know, we get it. Emma's spoiled, Emma's rich, Emma's pretty, Emma thinks a lot of herself, and her governess has just left. That is the inciting incident, the governess leaving, which is going to move the rest of the plot forward. So this is a phenomenal, this is just such a great exposition. I cannot say enough great things about it. Next one. This example is much more contemporary. It's from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you live. And I'm going to read just a little bit of this, and we're going to see how J.K. Rowling sets up this story. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Now, take a pause. Just like in Emma, this just screams, we know exactly what's going to happen. Something fantastic, something miraculous, something magical, something out of the ordinary is going to happen to these people. Rowling, too, very distinct voice, particularly in this one, in this book. The voice is just very, very distinctive and has that sort of Austen-esque commentary to it. All right. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large moustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. So, again, very quickly set up. We get a sentence on the father, a sentence on the mother, and a commentary on the son. And notice how she uses the analogy of the neck to compare both the husband and the wife. So we get very vivid images of these people, but we also get the sense that they are not terribly nice. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret. And their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't have a sister, because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursleyish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never even seen him. The boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. And this is such a great introduction. We talked about setting up a question that the reader is going to ask. Okay, what's the secret? I'm at least going to read till I know the secret, right? And so we have these very distinct characters. We know where they live. We know kind of what they do. We know they have a son. And we know, there are the Potters. And the Dursleys, oh my goodness, they don't want to have anything to do with the Potters. So this is just such a great sort of introduction, brings in the questioning, great authorial voice. Both of these are phenomenal examples for you. So just a few pieces of advice on this now. Really take this to heart when you're thinking about that. Make sure you ask, how can I bring things to life, write details that really help introduce me to the characters very quickly, introduce me to the situation very quickly, get the reader asking questions, and bring my authorial voice in as well. I hope this has been helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I wish you well with your writing. Bye.